I'm rich. We can stop now. Chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich, Desire. The starting point of all achievement and the first step towards riches is what this chapter is called. Now, let's see if this is actually the first step towards riches. If we could do this, we'll be rich. We're taking the first step. We're on the way. So, what does it mean to desire something? Right? Is it just a wishing for something? When you say you desire, I desire, or is that the same as saying I want this thing? Does desire have a stronger weight to it? In the last chapter, we heard about Hill giving more power to thought, right? Giving it a more metaphysical weight. It's not just something that can be taken lightly. If we want to ever be successful, we have to take our thoughts seriously, right? We have to shape and guide them along a trajectory. So, what does it mean to desire something? Is it just a wishing? And Hill has a very specific definition of what desire is, right? And that'll be fleshed out in this chapter, but is it the same as wishing, right? Is a desire the same as wishing for something? I want this thing, I wish for it, I hope it happens. It's a want, right? So on page 23, Hill writes, in the beginning, when the desire first appeared in his mind, it may have been, and probably was, only a wish. So Hill is here separating desire from wishing, right? I may wish to become rich, but to desire riches for Hill shows that I'm willing to do something about it. It's not just a wishing for something to happen, but rather it's a strong want, right? A desire is a want, but it's a strong one. And a strong want, that's usually backed by reason or a strong why. For example, I could just wish, to buy a nice car. Or I could wish to get riches so I can take care of my mother's health expenses, right? Depending on the person, these could have the same strength. I mean, I could want the car just as much as I want to take care of my mother. But here I'm assuming that wanting to take care of one's mother overrides the desire for a car, but I'll leave that up to you. So for Hill, desire and wishing are separate things. Wishing is an inactive want. Like I wish I get rich, and it's inactive, right? I don't do anything towards it. I wish for something and it might appear without my doing so. For example, I wish to get rich and my parents win the lottery and then give me a couple million, right? I did nothing for this. It just appeared by luck or chance in the world. My wish somehow aligned with reality, but not with my doing anything besides wishing, right? I didn't take any actions. I didn't even buy the lottery ticket in that scenario. My parents did. Like I didn't take any action towards it. I didn't get to choose my parents. I was born into this family. So it's inactive. I did nothing towards it. However, a desire for Hill, right, is a strong want that one is willing to act towards. So it's not just a wish for something. I wish to get rich. I have a desire to get riches, which means that I'm willing to put action towards making it happen. It's not inactive. We wish for things for many reasons, but when we wish for riches, it's usually because it seems so easily attainable, right? Why do we think it's easily attainable? Well, because we see people who are successful once they've already reached that point in their life. We see them when they've already succeeded. We don't see the hardships and trials they went through, all the failure, all the self-doubt, all the setbacks, right? We see them when they've made it. And the people we do see kind of along the journey, for example, when you follow an artist that isn't famous yet or is just growing and is a small fan base, people tend to like to witness that journey more. right? It humanizes them, like, but nevertheless, we see the end goal and think that we can bridge that gap, and just it goes from the wish to being rich or whatever. But wishing in this way that Hill is describing is surrendering any power towards its happening. Again, it's inactive. You have no control over your wish, whereas a strong desire, whereas a desire is a strong want. And it's not just a want that is a wish, right? It's not inactive, it's something that is active. You work towards it. Moreover, a wish, can be a fleeting thought. But our strong desires are not, or they should not be. So we continue to want them. We continue to wish for them in a sense. Even if we don't act towards them, they linger and they reappear when we think we've forgotten them. So, for example, you could have the same want that keeps reappearing in your life, and you kind of squash it and then it comes back again, right? It's like a residual desire. Or even if we don't want them, they continue to come back. So for example, you could just keep wishing throughout your life to get rich. It's like it's a desire that won't go away until you get it, maybe, or you don't, or you just forget about that goal or whatever. But these residual desires seem to keep coming back. They linger. So I'm sure a lot of adults in society at a certain age have wished to become financially successful, financially rich. But will wishing make them rich? Will wishing make you rich? Right? What about desiring riches? And when I say that, I mean something like, what about desiring riches to the point of obsession, followed by a plan with practical steps, along with consistent action towards that plan, while learning and adapting from any obstacles? Right? Will that make you rich? Maybe, maybe not. But one is at least trying to take an active approach to it, whereas the other is just they say it like they say everything else. Like it doesn't hold any weight, right? It's like if you have a buddy you can't, like that doesn't follow up on any of his plans, right? Oh, it's like, I want to do this now. It's like, okay, they might, but they most likely won't. They never usually act on it, right? It's just another wish, I want to do this, it's my goal, but really it's just a wish. They're not going to take any action towards it, right? But when you have this kind of burning desire, it must bring action out of it. If not, even if it is just in your thought, keeping that thought alive and stressing yourself out in a positive way towards trying to act towards it, learning more about it, researching, adapting, whatever you have to do, is not just a wish, because even in that scenario, you're actively trying to think about it. And you're thinking about why you're not acting. And you're stressing out and you're trying to find solutions for it. So even before you've actually even taken action, that middle ground is still trying to transform a wish into a desire. You're trying to take that thought that's, I wish to be rich, and trying to find actions for it. And then you could sit and think about why you're not acting towards it if you have that plan, but at least you are there. And then we could talk about the initiative, right? Actually turning thought into action. But as long as it's not just a wish, as long as you realize that it will take active effort, not to say luck and chance and whatever don't play a role, they always play a role, but doing what we can control towards it and hoping that we can succeed. It's better than just wishing for something, right? At least it gives us a chance. So a wish can just be a fleeting thought, but our desires are not. Hill talks about Edwin C. Barnes. The goal of talking about Edwin C. Barnes is to talk about how he chose his definite goal and used all his energy, all his willpower and effort, and all that he could sacrifice towards its attainment. Right? He was okay starting anywhere as long as opportunity was possible for growth towards his goal. Imagine having a goal for yourself and not seeing any progress towards it for 5 years. Would you stay at it? Right? Like, what if you were going to the gym for 5 years and Your goal was to lose 10 pounds, let's say. And you didn't see any progress towards that goal for 5 years. Would you continue at it? If you started a business and you didn't make a sale and you were actively working on it, right? Like you're actively putting effort towards making it happen and you're just not getting any results, would you stay at it for 5 years? I think a lot of people would give up after 1 year. I think a lot of people would give up on their first try and getting a failure, let alone 5 years of constant rejection, of nothing happening, no sign of progress. Hill writes on page 23, 5 years passed before the chance he had been seeking made its appearance. During all those years, not one ray of hope, not one promise of attainment of his desire had been held out to him. Nothing. No sign of progress, no sign of attainment, or even that his goal is getting closer. So to everyone at the company, Barnes looked just like every other employee, right? But the key difference is, for Hill, is that he appeared this way to everybody except himself. He didn't let that goal die. He didn't let that desire become a fleeting thought, even after 5 years of no sign of progress. He didn't let it die. So everyone externally thought Barnes was just another employee. However, he had higher expectations for himself and he wasn't wavering on them. He kept those expectations of himself for 5 years. He didn't let his vision of himself die for 5 years with no sign of progress. Now, again, most of us give up on our goals at the first failure, let alone 5 years of no progress, no sign of achievement, no reinforcement in any way. So for 5 years, he never got that hope. And imagine the negativity, and not even from other people like, oh, maybe you should change, maybe this isn't working, maybe, all the external negativity that we're faced with anyway. But imagine, again, like the internal negativity he must have felt, right? So one can imagine oneself thinking, I've been doing this for 3 years and still nothing. Is this the wrong thing that I'm doing? Am I wasting my time? Am I not as good as I thought I was? Why am I not being considered? Maybe I should have taken that other opportunity that I was told about. So imagine the degree of doubt we face within ourselves of all that time and seeing no progress, let alone the external negativity. All that to say that this was clearly not a simple wish or a want, right? So he had a real desire here. So because Barnes put in effort for 5 years without recognition before his goal became a possibility, that whole 5 years he had to keep that desire alive in his mind. So he kept it alive through all the self-denial, all the fear, all the indecision, right? He was constantly battling negative emotions and continually choosing his desire before it ever became a physical reality. Continually choosing his desire. Again, you could wake up one day and not feel like it, but he chose it anyway. He chose it for 5 years without seeing any progress. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And that's what Hill means by desire. So again, to tie it into the book, right? Do you desire riches like that? Do you desire whatever your goal is to that degree that you're willing to put effort towards it and keep it alive in your mind for 5 years, even if you don't see progress? What if it takes 10 years? Just so we know what desire is, right? The kind of desire he's calling for. It wasn't just a simple wish. Barnes wasn't content with his station in life, right? He had a plan by which to attain his goal, and he burned all the bridges behind him. So there was no option in Barnes's mind for retreat. He maintained his desire and made it the dominating obsession of his life. He was willing to risk it all for this desire, and he most likely had to keep learning and improving himself until the opportunity presented itself or until he got good enough to make that opportunity happen, right? And finally it happened. On page 24, Hill writes about Barnes, saying, "He did not say, I'll work there for a few months, and if I get no encouragement, I will quit and get a job somewhere else. even the self-talk there is very different, right? He didn't set up a fake deadline for himself saying, oh, if I'm going to try this for 2-3 months, and if it doesn't work out, then I'll do something else. He didn't give himself an out. He said, it has to work out or I'm dead, right? I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep putting effort towards it until either it happens or I pass away, right? He wasn't willing to waver on this desire. A lot of us do this, right? We set timelines for things, and then if they don't, it's almost like a scapegoat. Because then you could do minimal effort until the timeline comes and then just back out and be like, oh, it wasn't meant to be, it didn't work or whatever. And then we give it back up to the world, We say, oh, it wasn't meant to be. But really we put like 5% effort for a week or whatever. Maybe we did put 100% effort and it just didn't work. That doesn't necessarily mean stop, is what Hill is saying, right? It's not, that means it wasn't as strong of a desire as you thought, right? You didn't want it as bad as you said, or as badly as you thought to your own self, right? You wouldn't have given up. Or maybe it's just that you need to develop in your character to become the kind of person that can hold the desire in their makeup, even if they don't see progress towards it for 5 years. They're still willing to take on that negativity and stress and whatever that comes along with it to make it happen, because the alternative is not making it happen. So did you actually want it, right? Did you desire it? Did you have this burning desire? So he left himself, Barnes, right? All this to say, Barnes left himself with no possible way of retreat. So he had to win or perish, is a quote on page 24. So on the bottom of page 24 onto 25, Hill writes, a long while ago, a great warrior faced a situation which made it necessary for him to make a decision, which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe, whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into boats, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded soldiers and equipment, then gave the order to burn the ships that had carried them. Addressing his men before the first battle, he said, you see the boats going up in smoke? That means that we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We now have no choice. We win or we perish. And they won. So there he's talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, the great general. We win or we perish. We burn the boats. There is no escape. Fight or flight. You can't flight. You have to fight. Backed in a corner. Is this the kind of commitment we need for our goal? And again, this is the first step. There's 15 in this book, right? And already it's asking of us a kind of very serious commitment, right? Like, where do we want this thing that we get to choose, but do we want this to this degree? Do we want whatever it is our desire is? And again, the goal of the book is riches. So do we desire riches, or whatever your goal is, to this degree? But that is what desire is for Hill. So you have to be honest with yourself. Are you willing to burn the way out? Are you willing to go all in on this thing and not waver in your desire? Like, not want it for a year or 2 years or 3 years. If it doesn't happen, then you change your desire. Have you thought it through? Is this actually what you want? That's a major commitment you're making, right? He's asking of you a commitment. And he's testing your resolve, or he's testing you as a person. Is your desire actually a desire, or is it just a wish? And he's putting it on you. Now, this is the first tool that Hill gives. And it's more a task on the reader, right? And this is the first step that will get you closer to success. This will get you to riches. A definite chief aim is your life's main focus. This is the foundation for Hill, for his entire philosophy. If you don't have a goal, then you're not doing anything. When someone asks what your life goal is, this should be your answer. There are 6 steps that must be followed. The first step is deciding the exact amount of money that you want. Step 2 is asking you, what are you willing to sacrifice for its attainment? Step 3 is choosing a definite date by which you will have obtained this money. Step 4 is creating a definite plan and begin immediately putting it into action. Step 5 is writing 1 to 4 down as a statement. And then step 6 is reading the statement aloud twice a day, once in the morning and once before going to sleep. When you read this, believe it is possible to be in possession of the money that you're asking for. Believe that you can attain the goal that you're setting out for yourself. Those are the first 6 steps that Hill gives us to get us closer to a definite chief aim. And the interesting thing is, if you actually take this task seriously, you've taken the first step into turning your desire into physical reality. So by writing it out, you've taken the first step into turning it to physical reality because you've written it. It's not just a thought anymore. It's a real thing. You can touch it, smell it, taste it if you want to taste the piece of paper. But the point is that you've managed to transform this thought, this desire, into a physical equivalent, right? It's not money yet, but at least it's written out into the physical world as paper. And now you got to figure out how to turn that paper into a different kind of paper, which is money, right? So you've taken the first practical step towards getting to financial riches or towards any goal. Right now, if you have a desire and you've committed to it like we've been talking about, and now it's not just a thought anymore, you write it out, you've taken the first step. Now it's just staying the course. Again, you've taken your desire and turned it into physical reality. The first step, writing out the exact amount of money that one wants to accumulate. And the reasoning for that, I would argue, is that by knowing your financial end goal, then you could better judge the plan that is created. So for example, if my financial goal is $1 million and I create a plan to sell a program for $1,000, then I can't just have one client. The math doesn't add up. So when I know what my end goal is and I look at my plan, the plan has to lead me to that. Second, it serves as a safety against unfettered greed. For example, if you just say you want billions of dollars, why would you stop there? If you don't put an actual limit, you don't know what you're aiming for. Like, you don't know what you want out of life. In that point, you just want money. But what's the point of unfettered greed? Like, what's the point of money for itself? You want money for something. So it gets you thinking about what kind of lifestyle do you actually want and how much does that lifestyle cost to live? It's not about just billions of dollars, right? You could be satisfied with $100,000 a year to live the life you want, or $50,000 or $30,000, depending on the lifestyle you want to live, and be happy with that. So it's choosing the amount of money based on what you want out of life. So it gets you thinking about what kind of life you want to lead, and then the dollar sign that is associated with that. So think about why you want this amount of money. Step 2, what are you willing to sacrifice for it? And I think here it's easy to say, oh, I'm willing to sacrifice everything. But what does that actually mean? What is everything, right? Are you willing to sacrifice your free time for the next 5 years? What about spending less time with family and friends? What about working a full-time job and doing this business at night? What about when somebody presents you another opportunity? Will you change direction? What about when things aren't going as planned? What are you willing to sacrifice for it? And when you say everything, yes, everything, but it's also nothing at the same time. But when you think about, okay, I'm going to have to sacrifice my free time, or more of my free time. I might have to take 1 hour less of sleep. Can I manage that? Is that healthy for me? But that's the only time I can figure out to do this extra work or whatever. Are you willing to make these sacrifices necessary and listing them out and knowing what they are and then accepting the fact that you're going to have to make these sacrifices, right? Do you actually want this desire bad enough that you're willing to face these sacrifices? So not just saying that you're willing to sacrifice everything, but listing out what that is. And then when those temptations, let's say, present themselves, then you know that's a sacrifice that, oh, like I would love to do this right now, but I can't. Step 3, the importance of choosing a specific date. That speaks for itself, right? We give ourselves a deadline, and that stops us from saying things like, oh, well, I'll get around to it. which sounds like a wish, like, oh, I'll get around to it. I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? And by having a deadline, it causes within us, right, a good form of stress, or it could be good, it could be bad, but let's say we manage our stress and we know how to use deadlines in a way that serve as some wanted pressure towards action, right? So you set a deadline for yourself, and of course you could lie about that deadline to yourself, but you're only harming yourself the same way you would if you were using like a gym app and you're putting weights that are more than what you're actually doing. Like, you're only lying to yourself. You can't actually lift that weight. Yeah, why lie to yourself there? You're only fooling yourself. So a deadline could mean nothing, but it could also serve as pressure and a way to get action going, right? Step 4, creating a plan. When we don't know exactly what to do, we tend to stagnate. Anything goes at that point. If you don't know what you're doing, anything and nothing goes. So a plan at this point, which is again the starting point, even if it's not perfect, is crucial. It gives us some guidance of what we should be doing. So when we catch ourselves stagnating, we know something that we should be doing instead. That's going to get us closer to our goals. And at this stage, we may not even know how to create a proper plan that's going to get us to our end goal. Let's say my goal is to make $1 million. The service that I want to render is content. I might not even know how to physically make that happen. So my plan is not one based off experience, right? I haven't done this before. I don't know if my plan is actually a sound plan, but it's better than nothing, right? At least at this beginning point. And a plan isn't something that you just create once. It's something that you consistently revise and improve upon. So as long as I have something that gives me an action plan that I can start working towards, that I've mapped out, this is the beginning, this is the end, or this is where I am now and this is where I want to be, and these are the steps that will get me there, even if those steps, are not the most efficient way, have a plan and then work to improve that plan, right? As long as I have some guidance on what I should be doing instead of not knowing what to do at all. At least I have something to act towards, because then you could say, okay, today I'm going to do this. And then you realize, oh, what I thought I was going to get done in one day actually ended up taking 3 days. So now you could revise your plan based on actual experience, on your efforts and what you've seen and results, and keep improving and keep finding different ways to do things, testing, right? Keep updating the plan. And then acting right away. Well, what is the benefit of acting right away? As if action is ideal. That's what we want, is we want to take action towards our goal. And then when you act towards your plan, it serves as motivation. Wow, I created a plan. I wrote it down. It's in physical reality. Now I'm acting towards it. I'm acting towards changing this into a real thing, into the object that I desire, changing this paper plan into money, or into a plan into achieving my goal. And not just any action, right? Like, this is a desire that you've chosen to be your main desire. This is something that I would think that you'd want to happen. So when you see yourself working towards the thing that you want to happen, it just serves as a way to motivate you more. You realize that it's possible. Wow, maybe again, I'm not doing this the most efficient way, or I'm not seeing results, but at least it's happening. So you begin to turn acting towards your plan into a habit itself. So you develop the habit of planning and acting. Not just planning, not just acting, but both in tandem. Writing it out as a statement is so you can memorize it for yourself, but what is the benefit of the repetition? So again, we've learned that, or we know, right, that thoughts tend to disappear. We may have a great thought one moment only to watch it flee the next. We might be driving to work while thinking about the gym today, only to get cut off on our way to work, and it completely ruins our mood, and we forget about the gym completely. So by writing it out and repeating it repeatedly, we force that thought and that desire back into our mind. Again, if we forget about it, and it comes back into our mind because of repetition, so it's become like a habit and it's become an obsession, it goes back into our conscious mind, which gives us another opportunity to fight against that internal self. Okay, well, am I going to go to the gym, right? I might have forgot about the gym after that guy cut me off, but if I have to read it at night again, right, and I've made that a habit, and then that's telling me to go to the gym, I'll be like, why didn't I do it? And injects that thought of your desire back into your mind. And then you could have that internal struggle. Am I going to go? No, I'm tired. All the excuses and all the reasons that you have. But at least it gives you another chance to argue with yourself towards your goal. Are you going to do it? And more than this, right? So the repetition is key because it'll shape our thought. It's creating a thought pattern. It's creating a thought habit and an obsession. There are other things that could remind us of our goal. Daily reminders, habit trackers, to-do lists, things like that will inject our thoughts back into our mind even when we forget. Habit, obsession, our health consciousness, etc. Even if you had forgotten the thought, it probably would have reappeared if you are in the habit of this kind of repetition because of the fact that you've turned it into an obsession. So the stronger that you can almost brainwash yourself with your desire, the better. Because even if you get cut off, your mind will still go back to it sooner or later. Or you'll have other habits in place to catch you. That's before the even acting part. That's just so you remember the desire itself, your goal, your main goal. Because it doesn't mean anything if you just have it and forget about it. Right? So you have to constantly keep it in mind to the point of an obsession. And that doesn't necessarily sound fun, but okay, this is the first step. If you're not okay with this, then, maybe riches, you could just wish for it and hopefully it happens. Right? Or any goal. But if you want to be able to take as much control as you can, then you have to at least think about this in this way and be ready to mentally inject these thoughts back into your brain and act upon them. Or at least try to act upon them. And stress when you're not acting towards them. And obviously manage your stress, and there's a lot of mental health that still goes into it, but again, for the purposes of this book, this is what he's calling for. You have to become obsessed about money. So on page 27, Hill writes, if you truly desire money so keenly that your desire is an obsession, you will have no difficulty in convincing yourself that you will acquire it. The object is to want money and to become so determined to have it that you convince yourself you will have it. So from the last time, what does it mean to be money conscious? And it's something like having your mind filled completely with the desire of wealth and its accumulation, right? That you become obsessed and see yourself in the attainment of the wealth that you're after, or the goal. And Hill argues that only those who are money conscious have the capacity to accumulate riches, right? You have to be obsessed with it. Going back to step 6, or our definite chief aim, as a statement written out that we're repeating to ourselves. Hill writes that following these 6 steps are the bare minimum. They require no hard labor or sacrifice. You don't have to walk thousands of miles or perform any heavy labor to do it. You just have to sit there and think about what you actually want and write it out. But what it does take is the use of one's imagination to sit and think about what they want in concrete terms. What do you actually want? That's not an easy thing to think about. How much money do you want? When do you want it by? Are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to sacrifice? This takes a lot of imagination, especially because a lot of us don't know exactly what we want, right? Again, we're not determined. We're free to choose, in a lot of cases, what we want out of our lives, right? What do you desire? How much of it do you desire? Why do you desire that much? What are you trying to do with that money? So our dreams are somewhat vague. And when someone asks us how we plan to accomplish something, we don't know. So if you tell someone you're going to get rich, the first question is going to be back, how? How are you going to do that? How are you going to get rich? So by following the steps that he's given, you're actually taking the first step to actualizing riches again. So it's one thing to say it, but writing it down and beginning to repeat your goal in your mind is the first step of the action plan. By putting it in writing, you are beginning to physically manifest your desire to accumulate riches, right? You've taken the thought and you've put it into physical reality. Now it's just to transform this paper into money. And again, that's the chapter we're at the very beginning. So the first step of getting riches is writing it out and thinking about what you want and how much you want and how badly do you want it, and repeating it to yourself and making it an obsession, becoming obsessed about this thing that you've set for yourself, that you've chosen voluntarily to get into. Nobody's going to force you to aim higher than where you are in life. You got to choose. So you're voluntarily going to fill out these 6 steps if you actually want it bad enough. I mean, a lot of people might just listen to this and not do it. I might just even teach it and not do it. And that's why we go back to the first chapter and talking about that paragraph, where if you actually understand it and know how to apply it, then you could just not read the book. But a lot of people might understand these things but not put them to use. Before you can transform the desire of money into a reality, you must know that all who have created great fortunes first did a certain amount of dreaming, hoping, wishing, desiring, and planning before they acquired money. And that's a quote from page 28. And on page 29, Hill writes, "You may as well know also that every great leader from the dawn of civilization to the present was a dreamer." Because dreamers or leaders are visionaries, right? They see something that other people might not be able to see, and they have a goal and they can motivate people towards that goal and motivate themselves towards the goal, right? Imagine looking at like a plane of grass and being like, I can create a city here. They had to envision that in their own mind before it ever became a reality, before it could even have the potential of a reality. So first they had to have the thought, but then they had to have the vision and the obsession to make it happen, and the time. And then that vision was so strong that it motivated teams. And then they had to learn how to manage the teams and get them to keep working together. So all leaders are dreamers, right? They're visionaries. You need a vision to be a leader. And in this way, Hill is calling us to be leaders of our own lives, right? So before you could ever lead somebody else, you got to start taking leadership of your own life. What do you want? What is your vision? Is it clear? If it's not clear, then you could never get there because you don't know what it is, right? You can never attain followers that will help you get closer to your vision. Maybe you could, get somebody to work for you for money. But as soon as the money runs out, they're going to leave, right? So a good leader needs to know what the goal is, explain why it's important, how to get there, and work constantly to close that gap between vision and reality. You have your vision and you have where you are now, and you try to bridge it as much as you can. So for your own life, you need to be a leader. You need to know where you're leading yourself and not simply go with the flow or where the wind might take you, because again, the wind might take you to places you don't want to be, or it will bring you back to where you were without warning. And then you're kind of like this passive observer that's just watching their life happen and not taking any meaningful impact or giving meaningful thought or input into how it happens. So this touches on the introduction, where if you can't, at the very least, imagine yourself being rich, then you're never going to actualize it. It has to start with the vision. You have to have at least that leadership trait of creating a vision for yourself, what you want. And this gets into like the topic of fixed and growth mindsets, right? Are you open to new ideas? Do you believe that you have a control over the situation? Or do you simply not want to try? Do you think you're born to be, a great actor, or can you become a great actor? Right? Are you born naturally with these skills, or is it something that can be developed? And if not to the same extent, well, how much? Can we get close? Can we get maybe even better? Hard work beats natural talent if talent doesn't work hard, something like that. So are you somebody who believes that they can change their situation, or not, right? Do you think you have no control over your financial situation? It is what it is. I'm going to go with the flow on this. So the baseline for financial success is to have a burning desire to acquire it. You have to want it. You have to obsess over its attainment. The same way you would with any goal that you're trying to actually bring into reality. It can't just be a want. We can't just be inactive towards them, because then they might never happen. Hill talks about practical dreamers. So those who follow their dreams with actions are what Hill calls on page 29 the pattern makers of civilization. So these people manage to transform their thoughts into skyscrapers, into planes, countries, religions, and products, and a million other things, right? And all these started out as a simple thought. Then they converted the thought into the physical equivalent. And he suggests that you also need tolerance and an open mind, because if your mind is closed off to these ideas, you're doomed before you start. In my Assyrian culture, we have a saying which loosely translates to, don't waste your time arguing with a wall. And it's the same. It means, you've dealt with somebody who's so closed-minded that it didn't matter what evidence or proof, knowledge, circumstance, or any other tool of reasoning or argumentation that was at your disposal at the present. Their eyes were simply glazed over, and they weren't going to process anything. You're both wasting your time in that situation, right? This person was not able to be convinced no matter what happened, right? No matter what evidence came out there, their mind was just so shut off to any possibility of changing. And all this to say that if you're already believing that this type of philosophy won't work for you, then it won't. Right? If you don't believe there's even the possibility that you can change your financial circumstance, then you won't. If you don't even believe that you can fill out these 6 steps and that you're going to hit this timeline and you're not going to hit this goal, then you're not going to. The baseline is choosing what it is and then believing that you can make it happen in your life, or else what's the point? So he's calling dreamers to awaken here, right? To start believing that we can change our financial circumstances. And he reminds us that many great people were called crazy for their ideas until they succeeded. And on page 31, he gives a bunch of examples of this. But you can overcome the naysayers, right? You can overcome the people who have doubts, and yourself, your own doubts. And on page 31, he writes, "If the thing you wish to do is right, and you believe in it, go ahead and do it. Put your dream across and never mind what they say if you meet with temporary defeats, for they perhaps do not know that every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success." And again, because repetition is key, and we want to brainwash ourselves with our desire to accumulate riches, Hill reminds us that the burning desire is the starting point from which the dreamer begins transforming desire into physical reality. You will never achieve your dreams by being indifferent, lazy, and lacking ambition. Right? You're never going to hit the goals that you want by being lazy and indifferent towards them happening or not. Right? You have to need it to happen. You have to want it so bad. That's the very basis of ever achieving your goals, right? You have to want it bad enough and remind yourself how bad you want it. And if you feel yourself losing that want, to find a way to reignite it. That's the main thing. That's the very beginning, right? You must feel it. It is a way of being in the world. I need to make this goal happen, because action flows out of thought. Like, you could act, but you can only act in the direction of your goals for so long by not thinking about it. Right? You have to think about what it is and then act towards it. Your actions are not random, or very rarely random. So what does it mean to say something like, it's a way of being? And a way of being is the way one approaches their world, a way of being in the world, the way they perceive the world and how they act in it. So in the context of a burning desire, one must believe that they're going to get what they're aiming towards, or at the very minimum that it's possible to do it. This doesn't mean that we can be indifferent or lazy. We must accept that it will require work, right? And sometimes we might not even know what the work is, and that we're going to be met with failure along the way, and still choose to do it anyway. So it's a type of mindset that requires monitoring intensely, consistently, and sometimes for years without seeing progress, like Barnes. For example, think about someone who is acting confident for someone who is confident, right? We want to be the latter. We want to be the person who is confident, who doesn't have to think about, I don't have to think about acting confident. I am confident, right? So we want to be obsessed with our desires so that it overwhelmingly shapes our thinking, our actions in life. It may start by faking it, right? Like faking the obsession, like the person who first begins acting confident when they're actually nervous, which takes conscious effort. However, the goal is to ingrain it into your personality. And for that, we have to temper our spirit. Tempered spirit. The problem is that our past failures and disappointments have made us weary, right? In our heart of hearts, we set the goal and maybe think to ourselves that we can't really do it. I failed so many times in the past, what makes this time different? Like we set it, we went through the 6 things, the tools that Hill gave us, and yet when we sit and think about it, we might not actually believe that this thing will come true. I don't actually believe in my heart that I will get rich. I think I'll be met with failure or maybe give up. So on page 33, Hill writes, "You have been disappointed. You have undergone defeat. You have felt the great heart within you crushed until it bled. Take courage, for these experiences have tempered the spiritual metal of which you are made. They are assets of incomparable value." Remember that all those successful people we admire had heartbreaking struggles, which they managed to overcome, right? So it is a mark of success to have a desire so strong that you are willing to pass through trial and tribulation in order to make it happen, even in the face of disappointment, temporary defeat, gossip, and all the other miseries life is going to throw at us along the way. On page 34, he writes, "The turning point in the lives of those who succeed usually comes at the moment of some crisis." Now, you can, and many people do, allow disappointment, failure, heartbreak, sadness, addiction, bad habits, on, to so fully control their lives and bring them to ruin, right? Many people never learn how to convert their strongest emotions into dreams of a constructive nature. So think about, a man who goes through heartbreak after a bad relationship, and he becomes bitter and attributes the failures of this relationship to all women. Instead of trying to see areas where he can improve, things that could have changed the relationship that were within his control, right? And channel those strong emotions towards self-improvement and trying new things in the next relationships. The answer is closing oneself off and blaming the misfortunes of this relationship and this one woman to all women. That's not what we want to happen, right? We don't want to attribute the failures of the past to all things, in the future. We don't want to attribute this one failure to not believing that it could have ever happen again, right? And focusing on what we can change and what we can improve. Another example would be, the strong emotions that we experience at a funeral. So you become overwhelmed and obsessed with the sadness, right? If this is a loved one, especially. You can't think of anything else, and when you do, again, you feel guilty about not feeling bad, right? Like if you catch yourself laughing at a funeral, even if it's a memory about the person who passed, right? And like your friends bring up a memory and then you guys laugh about it, you still feel bad. You're like, I shouldn't be laughing here. Even though it's a good memory of the person, right? You become obsessed, and once you leave the funeral, you carry the sadness with you, right? Or you could channel those strong emotions into being grateful for still being alive, into trying to improve your life and your circumstance, into strengthening the relationships you currently have while you still have them, instead of just being miserable, right? Not to say don't grieve. That's not what I'm saying, but rather to learn how to channel strong emotions into constructive means. Now, on page 35, Hill writes, "No one is ever defeated until defeat has been accepted as a reality." And what does he mean by this, right? What does it mean to accept defeat as a reality? I mentioned it earlier in that, for Hill, failure is not something that happens externally, it's something that happens internally. So a circumstance cannot make me fail, right? It can set me back or push me back or resist my advances or make me give ground. However, I only fail when in my mind I decide that it's no longer possible or not worth trying and stop. That's failure. It happens mentally. So what one accepts as reasons for failure, another person who's actually dedicated may consider it as a necessary obstacle, which should be expected on the road to the goal. So I can't expect to become the best without dealing with, setbacks and failures and obstacles and along the way, right? I'm going to have to overcome. I'm going to have to adapt my character. I'm going to have to strengthen myself. And it's not up to us to determine how many challenges or failures or setbacks or whatever we're going to face. And we have to get rid of the misconception that the road will be easy and tend to give up at the first hardship. And a lot of people give up, again, before they even try. Like they give up in their own minds. They don't even think it's possible, right? So they give up and fail in their own mind before they even bother trying. So failure, right? Besides something like death or trying to be a famous soccer player and then losing the ability to use your legs, right? Most of our goals, again, are not in that kind of situation. We have a lot of power into making them happen. So in closing, I'm going to read a longer passage from page 36 and 37. And it goes, "There is a difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. No one is ready for a thing until he believes he can acquire it. The state of mind must be belief, not mere hope or wish. Open-mindedness is essential for belief. Closed minds do not inspire faith, courage, and belief. Remember, no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance and prosperity, than is required to accept misery and poverty." A great poet has correctly stated this universal truth through these lines. "I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged that evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer, he gives you what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid." See you next time.